Welcome into another episode of the Making Mark Wrestling Show on the Tell Me More podcast. I'm your host, Mac Moore, here again with Ethan Hrabe. How's it going, Ethan?
Pretty pandemic-y, for the most part, but other than that, good. How are you?
Not too bad. This is my mini vacation-ish thing that I've taken the first few days to just play a lot of 2K. The game plan was to both record podcasts and watch a bunch of stuff to talk about on podcasts. I did none of that. I got my 2K My Player up to 99 overall, and that seemed much more important. But I did stop to watch Double or Nothing, not on Saturday when it premiered. I was busy getting my last bit of work done before furlough. But Sunday morning, I was like, this is time for some wrestling. And despite being disappointed with most wrestling over the time since COVID changed our lives, I was pretty happy with Double or Nothing. I think beginning to end, that was a show that lifted me up, lifted my spirits just as I needed them. Ethan, how did you feel about the pay-per-view?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it was outstanding considering we're in the no audience world. Granted, AEW has that kind of little half step of being able to have like a semi-audience just of other wrestlers in the front row, which does really, I think, add a lot. But on top of that, it was also just great content in general. I think even without having that mini crowd, I think I still would have enjoyed everything. The Stadium Stampede, is that what they're calling it?
Yeah, Stadium Stampede.
Yeah, that was one of the most fun wrestling matches I've ever watched. So, yeah, I thought that Double or Nothing was pretty great, top to bottom.
All right, we can start with Stadium Stampede, that being the close of the show. We'll start with it here to open up here. I thought, if anybody listened to us talk about Money in the Bank, I made sure that I didn't want to tear anybody down. Whatever they liked. And in this time when people aren't getting enjoyment, I wasn't going to stop people from enjoying Money in the Bank. So even I had some snarky comments I sent to you guys in our Facebook message, but I had thought of a couple tweets to fire off, but really I didn't want to. I saw on Twitter people were having a good time with it, and I was like, fine, go for it. But a lot of my criticisms were just kind of based on the fact that I thought while there was some cheeky humor there was nothing that really made me laugh. I think there's a lot of times, depending on how it's done, and Vince's kind of childish humor, sometimes I get it, and I thought even then, I didn't think they did a good job of doing that type of humor, but if it succeeded, it succeeded, so that's fine. But what I wanted when I said on that podcast was it would have been great if it happened within the flow of a match that seemed to matter. I don't care if you're going to do that type of campy stuff, but it should be kind of like winking at the audience just a little bit, and you need them to actually be fighting while some goofy shit's going on. Stadium Stampede did that tenfold. Everything I described, that's what Stadium Stampede was. Even, funny things that, you think you can predict. You're like, oh, it's not going to be funny because I see it. I knew going in that Hangman Page is going to come in on a horse. That doesn't stop the moment from being hilarious. I thought he was going to come in through the smoke like everybody else as they're having their football-style entrance there at, I don't know the name of the Jacksonville Stadium, but at the Jaguars Stadium. They have that moment, and I was like, oh, where is he? I still believed he was going to come out on a horse, and luckily, Hangman did not disappoint. There were a lot of moments that, even if I thought, I knew where they were going, I think they did it well. I thought it was pretty funny. And at the end of the day, it was also a real wrestling match. They are putting each other through hell. They're not just throwing mashed potatoes at each other, ha, 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 ha. And then one person, takes a bump that's not a real bump. Two people get murdered, but oh no, there's actually a place to land on the next building. There's none of that. There's just good old-fashioned fun that happens to be in a ridiculous environment for wrestling. But they were still wrestlers kicking ass, taking names. That's how I felt about it. I thought it was really good. What parts of the Stadium Stampede match stood out for you?
Overall, one thing that stood out to me is that it flowed really well. It was very natural. They were able to bounce kind of from pairing to pairing and have each segment kind of unique in its own, almost kind of like chapters. Like this is probably like I imagine this being a very like storyboarded kind of match, like the way it was laid out, how it kind of moved from just location to location to location. I mean, obviously, as I think I've stated before on the show, anything that Sammy Guevara does, I'm a fan of. The look of terror in his face when he's running away from Hangman on the horse is a classic wrestling moment, especially as the callback to the golf cart. Um, the Nat Hardy reincarnations, I'm all about that. I'm here for that. The barroom fight with Hangman and Jake Hager, I thought really stood out as some of the like most intense like wrestling of the entire match. And then the finish of Sammy Guevara taking a one wing angel, obviously onto a designed platform, but still it's a good 15-foot one winged angel drop off of a stadium balcony. And for something that doesn't have a live audience, something that's clearly a pre-tape segment for these guys to be going through hell is just exactly the level of entertainment that I think people needed to make it feel like you were watching wrestling again.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff you bring up, those are really good moments, and those were all built up too, because they're fighting each other to get to those spots, which I thought was also good. It's not scrambling around, running, like they're literally going through hell, beating the hell out of each other, and then they had these areas of the stadium where they had these things planned out, and they did great. I would say if there was one thing I would have liked them to do differently, which I'm not saying is like a failure on their part. It's just like alternatively, this is another good way they could have done it. The bar fight you bring up, if they would have just had a few more better camera shots, or even tried to do kind of this is our cinematic match like WWE's doing. Like the moment they walk in, do it that way and have it be this full film that is basically a Western, because they were already alluding to that. They should have just made that actually happen.
Yeah, I agree. Like they halfway did it, and the dialogue involved and the setup of it was absolutely that. But yeah, you're right. That could have gone into. You could even had like a different aspect ratio. Like the bars come down from the top of the bottom, and it goes like sepia toned. Even I would have been that. I would have been down with that.
Yeah, I think it would have been solid. And then even just kind of it did still feel like a movie. It just felt like necessary roughness. I just felt like in the next scene, the Hangman Page's team was going to beat the KU Jayhawks.
Yeah.
But like it was still really good. I enjoyed the breakaway bubbly bottles on Jake Hager. Jake Hager is pulling off his role pretty damn good, all things considered, knowing what his skill set was on WWE. And he's not the type of guy who, if I went back and tried to say, oh, WWE screwed up with this guy, I think they gave him a lot of capital, did a lot with him. It's just kind of, the way WWE is structured and the way it was then and the way it still is now. He was never going to be a guy who is going to shoot to the top and stay there with what he was capable of. I don't think WWE screwed up. That's just the reality of the situation. AEW has brought him in, put him in the right situation, and kept him there.
And
I've
also,
been excited to see how that works.
To add to your point, wasn't he like 23, 24 when he like burst onto the scene in WWE? It's a young talent that I think did the best he could have done at the time, and just over time has just grown as a performer. Is another aspect of that. But yes, it is also a matter of booking and what who he's paired with as well. I think Jericho is really kind of showing that whoever you pair him with, they're probably going to get over, in one way or another, especially in AEW. But even going back to WWE, Jericho didn't really have like flop programs. It was and now he's got even more creative control. I think that everybody in the inner circle is just constantly elevated more and more every single week. You know, look at like, especially like going to Sammy Guevara and Jake Hager, but like Sammy Guevara before he joined Inner Circle was walking around with like the panda head. It's like, I don't know what this character is. He's in the Inner Circle, and now I immediately know what his character is. It's basically just like evil Justin Bieber, and it works.
Yeah, and he's found a level of confidence. He's been able to speak from within his character and do it in a way that I don't need him to be the coolest guy in the world. I don't need him to fit a certain role. I just need wrestlers that when they speak, they're not stumbling over a script, and that's kind of been the biggest difference between what AEW does and anything WWE does. Because even in NXT, as well as they've done the matches and they made takeovers really great, there are just times where that becomes a problem as well. When you
Yeah,
have people reading something specifically, even if maybe NXT lets them be a little bit more natural, they don't force them into a certain role and just kind of leave them there and then blame them for not pulling it off when they're left there.
right.
There's still just something about the scripts that there's definitely a benefit. There are certain guys you watch on AEW and you wonder what they could do if they were given a little bit more, but you'd also know that that's always going to be there, that there's a lot of top talent that know what to do even if they are not great at it. I don't think a lot of people thought Sammy Guevara was going to be a guy who'd be great on the mic, but when he is confident and he feels comfortable in his role, he has a charisma that comes through. You just need to let him do that. And I think even in the first little going, you could have watched AEW and thought, not just because it's a panda head and I don't know who he is, he wasn't having that confidence. He wasn't moving in that way. And you're like, oh, yeah, this would be the type of guy that he could do a lot of cool stuff, but he went to WWE. There'd just be no chance for him to pull anything off. AEW,
Mm-hmm.
once he got into that role, he's been elite at it. It's been amazing that he's been able to do that. I've enjoyed his performance. And then back to Jake Hager, don't let him talk. And maybe someday you do, and you got to figure out how to make it work. But that was always the problem with him. He's this big brute who's not as scary when he talks with a lisp. That just happens to be the truth. And it doesn't have to be just a lisp, because Bobby Lashley has shown you as a huge guy who just doesn't sound intimidating when he talks. So you try to limit that. You don't give him more. You don't keep working him and hope he gets better, because some of these guys, maybe over time they will. But Bobby Lashley's shown you over a decade it's not going to happen. When he comes back to WWE, don't put him in that same role, but WWE did. I like what they did with Jake Hager and what they've done. The guys who can talk and have shown that they're pulling it off, let them be the focal point. It's not just Chris Jericho talking. Santana and Ortiz have been pretty great, pretty hilarious. And in that same mold where we're talking about why this match is successful, I think that's why they've been successful in AEW.
Mm-hmm.
They are hilarious, but they're still beating the crap out of people.
Right.
Somebody might make the argument that you're undercutting the character. They're no longer as scary when, Ortiz is scared of 3 feet water. I think it's just hilarious. And there's not going to be too many situations where somebody is going to bury him or drown him by using 3 feet water in a wrestling match. So you do it one time, it's hilarious. There's not a situation where that takes away from how scary he can be down the road, because they work a style that can be rough and intimidating and builds into their character. They are also hilarious individuals. Let them show that. Don't hide that
Yeah.
because you're worried that's going to ruin the character. It enhances the character.
And then also, just not even within the company as a whole, just even within that one stable, you have everyone kind of filling certain roles. Like Jake Hager doesn't need to speak, so Jericho can speak. Santana and Ortiz don't need to be the most intimidating, because that's Jake Hager's role, and then you have Sammy Guevara, who kind of does a little bit of everything. He does some stuff that's comical, but he also does some of the best, flippy shit in all of wrestling. You have all these different avenues that are filled, so they don't have to have 3 guys that are all the most intimidating. Like there's room for that comedy element, especially when it's guys that are, think of like henchmen or stooges in like a comic book or a comic book movie, where there is like a comedy element to them, but they're still formidable to a point, but they're not the toughest guy. I think you have to have that role there where all avenues are approached.
Yeah, and I think they're definitely doing that. They showcase that in this match. I think is kind of even the bigger thing to take away is it's one thing to kind of have all of that kind of built into the stable. It's how you present that, and then how do you do it in a crazy match that's in a big football stadium that doesn't. There's no real set of rules, which I actually think helps. I think that it wasn't as confusing. I mean, once you get in, you're still kind of like, well, how does this work? And then they tell you it's one pinfall. That's it. Happens anywhere. This is as long as you know that parameter, everything else is in the air for them to do whatever they want throughout the stadium. Somebody could convince me that maybe they were too cheeky. You wanted this to be a little less Benny Hill in parts, and I would say sure, but we're in a time where we need a lot more Benny Hill in our lives. So I'm going to take it, and I would say this, this had the same game plan as the Money in the Bank matches. I think this accomplished it way better than those matches. For the whole pay-per-view, they just did a really good job, and you mentioned earlier that maybe it would have been good without the people around the ring, that it was good enough to live up to that without those people. I'm not sure if I feel that way. I don't know if a lot of the stuff they did without even just the faint cheers, without these, other wrestlers that are pretty good at mimicking the same chants and the same reactions as a very smarky indie crowd. I thought that was massively important. And and it's exciting to see Raw finally take that up this week. And hopefully that can improve some of the WWE shows going forward.
And don't get me wrong, I definitely agree that it is an enhancement to the product. It's not that, I guess saying that it didn't need it isn't really the right way to phrase it, but it's that I think it still would have been enjoyable even if it was missing that element that is, as we've kind of said, between the difference between watching WWE and watching AEW, that seems to be one of the biggest differences that stands out if you've tried to watch the week-to-week shows, and makes AEW more palatable.
Yeah, and so I guess my thing is the idea that it was going to be entertaining enough. If I try to compare matches, I think this one had more good matches, but it's like if I was going to take the top of like the AEW Double or Nothing match, like that is not Stadium Stampede, and the best Money in the Bank match that is not the Money in the Bank matches, then I'm probably going for WWE. I'm going Drew McIntyre, Seth Rollins. And it's a pretty tight one. You could probably flip a coin and pick for AEW. But I think at the end of the day, God, the more complete match is Moxley, Brodie Lee. But I think the better storytelling initially, and the one that compares more to Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre, is Cody Rhodes, Lance Archer. I feel like the ending did not do what it needed to, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. I think that if you played that match out without a crowd, I would end the same way I felt about Drew McIntyre, Seth Rollins. This was really good, but I also couldn't get myself to care fast enough, you know? And that's like the biggest difference is you could maybe argue that because the AEW had enough matches throughout, it wasn't like, oh, here's one match that would have been really good if they had a crowd, as opposed to Money in the Bank was, here's this one, and then there's a lot that I wasn't going to care about if there was a crowd. AEW did a better job of that, but that crowd really just was the thing that was like, okay, this is keeping me into these matches where otherwise I wouldn't notice how well the match was doing because it would just be so awkward. There's just no way around it without some level of sound. It could be music, but it has to be
having that crowd is great, and I think, and there were times where it almost seemed like there may have even been like some sound piped in. I could be wrong about that, but it kind of seemed that way at times.
They were piping in the wrestlers into the Stadium Stampede match, so they were definitely practicing with it. So I don't know how much manipulation was involved. Not just the footballs that were thrown at Chris Jericho's groin, but also with the audio that was coming in. But for the most part, it did just sound like 15 wrestlers that are chanting the way they would chant, and it's still kind of, if you're comparing it to a normal wrestling show, it's awkward. But when you compare it to the competition, which is WWE with the Sound of Silence, it wins hands down. There's just, and I was kind of slipped in earlier, the music. I'm not kidding. Like, I don't need it to be queued up perfectly in post. Like, it doesn't need to be a pre-recorded match the way the Boneyard match was. But that music made it work. Same way with the Firefly Funhouse match. The Stadium Stampede could have been a little problematic if they didn't have the crowd pumped in. I think that match kind of lends itself to not having that sound. But I did notice that when they played the audio, and they didn't do it the whole time, just in like certain spots, and it was kind of light. So it was the same way they do any sort of like crowd is you let them hear what they sound like when you have a backstage segment playing on the Titantron. They kind of did it at that level, but it worked. It added something to it that I think is necessary. It's really any sound that is kind of getting rid of that deafening silence that we've heard in WWE shows for the past 2 months.
Yeah, and thinking back, did the Money in the Bank match have commentary to it?
They were definitely, there was commentary. It wasn't good. It was a similar situation to, and that's probably just as big of a problem with why AEW is doing better than the main roster WWE shows, is the commentary has not been good. It's been sporadic. Sometimes they'll get like, I think it was Samoa Joe they were bringing in to be the guest commentator, which was working, but it was still just so much of this like stick with the script. And so Samoa Joe was the best part, but it was still lacking. And those moments on Dynamite when Chris Jericho is on the mic, I mean, it creates a level of entertainment that you do it for spurts forget there's no crowd. And that's the most you can ask for in this time frame. And I would imagine if WWE wasn't going to finally bend and give in, the reports are that they weren't going to do the wrestlers in the crowd because they worried that they would get held to task for having too many people out there, and they're right. If they would have came out and did that the first week, there would have not been the same reaction to what happened when AEW decided to do it. So, but for me, it was like, you saw it work. You know that your competitor will get put through the same ringer. So at the very least, you're more likely to get attacked by national outlets that are like, look at WWE doing this right now. Not only did they buy off the state of Florida, they also are being reckless out here with these people in the crowd. But in terms of the wrestling fans, which is where they get most of their flack, they're not going to get it. Worst case scenario, you get somebody saying, oh, look at WWE copying AEW. And I think most of us to the point, it's like, screw you. We don't need to hear your shit on that right now about, copying this genius move in this time frame. I was just amazed that WWE took as long as they did. Once AEW didn't get held to task for it, WWE should have been right behind them, and they waited way too long to finally give in.
And the only thing that's even remotely a possibility is the fact that they didn't want it to be an obvious like copycat. That there is that desire to, like, WWE doesn't need to do what AEW is doing, because if they are, then that means AEW is on their level, which is the whole kind of stance of WWE is that that's not the case. But who gives a shit? I mean, like, make your product better, put people in the crowd, even if it's guys who just wrestled the last match. Like, it's something that adds a lot of value to the content. I mean, you're already still putting on professional wrestling during this time frame. If all of these people are already exposed to each other, then this is as safe of an avenue as what you've been doing.
Yeah, I think that there's reason to worry about that copycat attack. I just also think it's so stupid, and maybe it would have been worse like the week after. There would have just been, a lot more people.
And that's what I'm saying is if they had done it immediately after. So there has been a bit of a buffer. And I mean, it's still it doesn't matter if it's a copycat. It's the right move.
Yeah, and it seems like something that is easy to fix, and if you weren't going to follow AEW's move, then you would do something like music or piped in fake crowd noise. Even something as simple as if you already have the wrestlers there, it's like in their dressing room, they have a phone that is attached to audio that is being piped in as like them reacting in the back. If you're worried about the safety aspect, or in this case, just worried about the optics aspect. There are other solutions. WWE just did nothing and waited this long, and it's like, okay, I'm glad they did it.
And that might have just been after the initial, red flag of them buying off the state of Florida. It might have just been that it was throwing that kind of a 1-2 punch might have just been too much in the span of 1 week.
Yeah, right now it's good to see them making a move. It's good to see that both wrestling companies are doing what they can to make a good product. And that's like probably the biggest fear I had with WWE going into this time frame was this is normally like just kind of drift mode. Like this is like, let's make it through the summer before we have to start putting on real storylines. Right. So I don't think they were as prepared as other wrestling companies when COVID happens. Like, oh yeah, not only did this ruin WrestleMania, now this time frame when we normally kind of regroup and take the laziest possible method, it's like now you better step up because your numbers are going to plummet. Let's just go back to Double or Nothing though and like start hitting on some of the other matches on the card. I had already brought up earlier. I do want to talk about it real quick. The Cody versus Lance Archer match. This was one that the first thing we have to talk about, because we have to be fair. We have to show that we're not AEW shills. When something bad happens in AEW, we are going to have to talk about it just as thoroughly as we do dumb things in WWE. So
talk about that belt.
Ethan, you got a good look at the TNT title. How do you feel about that belt?
At first I saw a picture of it online, and I guess the picture didn't do it justice because it's like, oh, it's not that bad. It's not as bad as the 24/7 title. Then I actually saw it on the pay-per-view, and they did make the note of like, by the way, this is not a finished title. Like this is like very quickly, like basically admitting that they also thought it was shit. It's just unfortunate. I don't know what the finished product is supposed to look like. It did kind of draw away from the match, which I really enjoyed. but I don't know. Still, I do get some weird joy of like watching Mike Tyson sit there and not know how to react to a wrestling match. In kayfabe.
Yeah, he's a very awkward person. I don't think it's just in kayfabe.
He's super awkward. Yeah.
So that's kind of the very. Yeah. I accept it. I think at that point it's not.
I enjoyed it. It's
not bad acting.
I want to make that clear. It's just who he is as a person. Yeah. So he's sitting there holding this like whatever you want to call this belt and cheering for the wrong guy for the first half of the match. So I think he was like corrected on camera of somebody pointing out like, no, you're supposed to trip Cody, and then he went really like he got it, but I don't know. It's also Mike Tyson. Like, what you gonna tell Mike Tyson not to be Mike Tyson? Good fucking luck.
Let him do what he's gonna do. And you think about that when he was part of the Stone Cold Shawn Michaels feud, like that was more awkward because it was him trying to remain this Mike Tyson character that wasn't him and just not react weird. And that's just how he reacts. Yeah. That wasn't him like confused by what wrestling is. Like when he sees
it's just Mike Tyson.
when he sees Lance Archer take out the henchman in the ring, and he has this like reaction that's almost like, I enjoyed that, but also, oh yeah, I should be like not even scared, but like this is like at me. And instead he's like, that's good shit, man. Like, and that's just Mike Tyson. I like that better. I like him to have the natural reaction that he has. It is interesting. We brought this up probably in early January when we were just talking about how AEW would make their next moves to keep competing with WWE. And one of the big things was, are they in that sweet spot right now where if they brought in some celebrities, what would it look like and how much could it impact AEW? Because obviously you don't have the same profile as WWE, but you do kind of have that underdog status. If you get anybody of significance, then you're getting more eyes on it at the right time. And when they're watching, you see a lot of the fans that might, at least when they're the same fans watching a WWE product, they're going to shit on using these big non-wrestling stars and putting them over in weird ways. Is it AEW able to capitalize on that, get that to benefit them without the fans revolting? And we both kind of ended in agreement. It's like they're in the honeymoon phase. Like, even if these fans weren't excited about it, even if it wasn't just AEW is going to do it better, they're not going to turn a part-time star into a champion or some shit. I think that, the fans right now would definitely just be okay with it. Mike Tyson is this weird spot because I don't think it helps you get new eyes on the product, but it is still, he's Mike Tyson. It's still a benefit. Yeah. It just still doesn't meet that criteria that we talked about in terms of, okay, can you get somebody who right now is on top, right now has a big following that will, if you say they show up on the pay-per-view or on Dynamite on Wednesday, will it get people to watch who otherwise wouldn't and might stick around when you give them a great product? And so I'm just wondering if Mike Tyson coming in, the only things that look like this cameo are other wrestlers like Arn Anderson's and Jake the Snake Roberts, where they're putting them into stories and making them a part of AEW. Those are the only types of big surprises we've gotten with AEW. Have they missed a great opportunity to bring in whatever those names are? You're connected with TNT. Can you bring in a Shaq and show up WWE? Because they love when they can get Shaq. Are there names that they could bring in that they're kind of failing right now to take advantage of that?
Dude, I think if Joe Exotic could get Shaq before he was big, then I think AEW can get Shaq. And I think Mike Tyson is still big enough. Like, I'm not saying put the TNT title on him, but he's a big enough name to where, like, when Mike Tyson does anything, it's news. Like, he's still that big.
I don't know if anybody heard Mike Tyson
bad.
would be on this show. I think it's everybody who's watching is like, ooh, Mike Tyson.
I was surprised by it.
But there weren't news stories afterwards, like, guess where Mike Tyson was this weekend?
Right.
That's just not what his star level is anymore. He's still a huge deal, but he's not bringing in that attraction anymore.
Okay, well, he is to me. All right, maybe
that's
just
fine.
Me.
I mean, that's cool for you, but you were already watching the show.
Yeah. And maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I don't know what Mike Tyson's. Maybe I'm biased. I don't know what his. Hang on, dog. Just hang on. Just trying to knock my charger off the cord. Just go lay down. We'll hang out in like 20 minutes, I promise. And yeah, I mean, I guess Mike Tyson's not as big now as he was at WrestleMania 14. Clearly not, but maybe that's just due to the plummeting of the Hangover franchise. Maybe it's due to everything else Mike Tyson's done over the last 15 years, or just time. But I guess I don't know who that alternative is at this point. Like you said, Shaq. Anyone who's actually still on television on a regular basis would be good. But I think when you get someone like Mike Tyson, even though he doesn't have that same star power, it maybe does open the door for other celebrities who do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, once again,
potentially, it's a theory. I mean,
I'm not saying the Mike Tyson is a negative. I just mean in terms of that need, yeah. I don't think Mike Tyson touches it. I think it's a separate.
I'm gonna send this to him. By the way, I'm gonna send this to Mike Tyson.
I didn't say anything negative about Mike Tyson.
I'm gonna tell him you did, and he's not gonna watch the video, so you're just gonna have to go off of what I say.
You could have done that any other day without me even discussing Mike Tyson. So I just have to live in fear, I guess, because you definitely know Mike Tyson.
So, you never know when I'm going to pull Mike Tyson out of my back pocket.
So, I mean, I'm just wondering, like, I don't need you to, like, name the guy, because who knows what connections are, what you can figure out. I feel like the door has to be opened a little bit when, Tony Khan, the Khan's connection, they're big time. If they wanted to,
good name for a tag team, by the way, the Khan Connection.
Yeah.
Like, bring Tony Khan in as a manager, and just get any two Samoans, and there you go.
We might want to save this for a few years down the pike. Keep Tony where he's at right now. Yeah, I think the only one I know that is like a star is Stephen Amell, and I just don't think that is anything either. I think it's cool. It's cool that Cody's friends with him, that they've brought him in and done some cool stuff whenever they want to. I just they need
But
to find somebody that meets that criteria. That is something that
you,
it will be on Instagram. There will be their audience will know they're going to be there
sure,
before they're there and bring them in. And I don't
and
think that has happened with anybody yet in AEW.
you know where that comes from, I think, is historically one factor, and maybe not for every single celebrity, but like one factor that is generally common is I think a lot of these people begin as wrestling fans to begin with. You know, people like Arnold Schwarzenegger is a good example. It's already a big wrestling fan, then you bring him in for like, I don't even remember what the program was. I just remember him like punching Triple H in the face in like 1999. You know, you just get that where you have that. So I mean, you look at celebrities who are big wrestling fans, and I think that's where you start. I think it'll be someone that you've heard of as being a wrestling fan. I don't know, George Kittle from the San Francisco 49ers. Get that guy. That guy loves wrestling.
I feel like he's a WWE first kind of guy, but we'll see.
He did I almost call it a promo. He did a press conference wearing a Pentagon themed Niners hoodie.
I'm not saying he's not
I think
a
he's a
hardcore
little more.
wrestling
I think he's a little
fan.
more. I think George Kittle is more AEW, and then I think Travis Kelce is more your WWE guy.
That's fair. I feel like Travis Kelce would do better in AEW, and George Kittle would do better in WWE. So maybe their fandoms are misaligned from where they do better.
I totally agree with what you just said.
So we didn't talk too much about the match. We got hung up on the Mike Tyson thing, which I'm glad we did. I don't think we wasted time on it because I think that was necessary.
I think more people need to be talking about Mike Tyson. If that were happening, then this would have been a way bigger deal, and it would have saved us that conversation.
That's fair. Cody, Lance Archer, this was one that I thought the match, I thought it started and told a great story that is not always done very well when you have the murder hawk that is Lance Archer. You have him built up
as this such a cool name,
as this unbreakable star, and the way he sold early on, I think, was genius. I think Cody was the perfect star to kind of play into that and tell that as good as it could be. My big thing is, and I don't think this is a big deal because over time it can start to work out. I think Lance Archer is just a little bit unseasoned. I think he's just a little bit away. Either it's gaining comfort in AEW or it's just learning how to play this role a certain way. Because I think he did all the things he was supposed to do, but he doesn't have that slickness that I enjoy from top guys. There's just moments when you can see him thinking instead of doing. And it does, like, for the most part, it doesn't take away from
slickness in the sense of work rate or character work during the match?
I think in this case it's more character work. I think for the most part the work rate, he was doing all the right things, and obviously he's a bigger guy, so if you're going to compare him to like Kenny Omega's, it's a whole different work rate conversation, but I don't like to think of it that way. I like somebody who just kicks ass. Yeah. Lance Archer meets that. It's the character. It's when he's going and selling that I'm not selling. I think part of it, and some of it is still the work rate when he's on the top rope and he's setting himself up for Cody to jump up there and to do a move. You can see him putting himself in place. And a lot of guys do that. I wish it happened less. I'm a big fan of seamless wrestling. The more you can avoid it looking like you're setting up a move, the better I like it. But there's just other moments in the match where you kind of see him getting himself to be like, okay, this is when I need to do this part. This is when I need to do this. Instead of just being that badass. He's doing all the badass things. There's just, right now, he's not quite as comfortable as I need him to be the guy who just beats the hell out of people, and that's his thing, Like
it's almost too much. I almost want to say like the phrase, like maybe like too much wrestling and not enough like brawling, like to where you want more of a. I mean, because he is like fulfilling checking all the boxes for like a wrestler, of the guy who, like you said, you're gonna notice, like you said, you want seamless wrestling, but especially when you have a guy who's like 6'8" and going to the top rope, he's got to be a little bit more, gentle getting up there.
Yeah.
He's got to be more careful
I
because if he
just,
moves too quickly or does something incorrect, then it's going to be more noticeable. Like that's, I think,
yeah,
historically, I think that is a thing with big men too in wrestling is their flaws are easier to see just because there's more limitations. So a guy who's 6'8" who can walk the top rope like a tightrope and hit a moonsault off of it
I thought he
is
did good doing that. Like that was,
and it was great. But
Yeah.
then like other times, I know what you mean too. It was like setting up for the next thing. Is like you don't want it to seem like it's. I think it was either you or Wade that had this this is like your big comment on like the Miz. You know, is like it seems like he's just a guy moving from this spot to this spot to this spot, and that's not what you like. That seems to be one of your, and not saying that it's not a thing to criticize, but like you guys specifically, both of you, I've heard you both kind of bring that up, and it's a reasonable criticism. But it seems like it's one of your biggest, like, I don't want to say pet peeve, but like, you get what I mean? Like the things that stand out to you.
I would say I don't compare Lance Archer to The Miz and what I'm talking about, but
well,
you know,
I'm also going to tell Mike Tyson that you compared Lance Archer to The Miz.
Okay.
But
Mike Tyson's gonna kick the shit out of me.
That's cool. That's something to put on your resume. I think I noticed moments like that, but it didn't give me a feeling of that was an overall like characteristic of Lance Archer watching that match. I really did buy into the like unbeatable, badass character that he was portraying and trying to get over. I think that there are things maybe he could have done differently, but I think he did it great. I really bought into his character. I think that the finish being that he's caught off guard and gets it with two finishers is the only way, that or like a cheap roll up is the only way you have him lose that match, because that's a match that you kind of like New Japan is where you're going to see this the most, where you have both guys are both more over at the end of the match. Like that doesn't bury Lance Archer or hurt Lance Archer at all. He got distracted and hit with two finishers and he got pinned. Up until that, he just looked unbeatable, like completely unbeatable, and then would get little moments of weakness and then just slam right back. So I thought that their ring psychology in that match, I thought was extremely well done. I really appreciated every element of it looking like Cody just, the longer that match went on, it looked like he was less likely to be able to pull it out until a couple of key moments happened.
So this might be the best way to better explain what I'm talking about. I think the ring psychology was perfect in terms of how they produced the match, where they were going with it. I think the way they executed it, Lance Archer could have been better. And part of it is just kind of, it's not a doing things wrong. And I probably shouldn't have just brought up the top rope thing. I just thought that was the time it was the most obvious that you saw it in his face. There are times that he doesn't, like, if you think back to like Brock when he first gets on the scene, Brock loves to manhandle people to the point that you're not sure whether he just enjoys manhandling people. This isn't an act. He's not put in the role of just being a badass. He doesn't like people, and he's going to throw you around, and it's going to hurt. I believe
that's New Jack is actually who we're discussing now.
I think Lance Archer, he does all the moves that they definitely look like they hurt. There are just too many times that I see him and his face is not conveying that character. Okay. And I don't know how much is growing comfortable, because he's not this 22-year-old young wrestler that, still kind of putting a lot of these things together. It's just that maybe it's getting comfortable in AEW. Maybe it's this precise character, and maybe it is big moments. The more he's in this type of match where Cody has put the spotlight on him, over time he'll get better. I'm not worried about him getting there. I'm just saying in this match, that kind of took me out of it a little bit, because even the ending that was perfect, it was the right way to go, but I felt like they kind of lost the steam there at the end. So I wasn't feeling it was just Cody like getting over on him. I felt like they built up, and then there was just something about those later stages where it kind of fell off, and then they just got to the right ending. But I wasn't in it the way I was early on in the match.
To me, the part I'll agree with is that in that match, normally when you have that dynamic of those two types, there's more of a breakdown of the big man. I think this one was a little more sudden towards the end.
Yeah.
And I get what you mean as well, as far as like him, but also, my experience of Lance Archer, primarily the most Lance Archer matches I've seen is when he was in a tag team. I know he's been on his own for I don't know how long now and how long before, but like I had never heard of him really and also that's my own ignorance, but I had never really heard of Lance Archer until it was him and Davey Boy Jr.
Yeah.
And they were this badass tag team. And then when they split, I didn't really I caught him in the G1, I guess. That was really it. That's the only bit of singles work I'd seen of his really before this. So I don't know if that's just my ignorance or if that is a factor of that he's not as seasoned as a singles competitor. Like it's that he's maybe just that monstrous badass of a tag team. And now he's having to carry the whole, load of that on his shoulders of being that character and also making sure that he is putting on a good match. There's a lot to it. For Lance Archer. And I think that him coming into AEW as strongly as he did and with the pairing of him and Jake Roberts, I think that is a lot of pressure and it's a lot of learning. So the kind of stuff that you're pointing out does make sense in a sense of somebody who maybe is still only improving, which is kind of my favorite takeaway from wrestling. Like if you watch a match and you see someone put on a good match or a great match and they're only getting better, then it really kind of knocks out a lot of the, negatives or future criticisms or future concerns, really. Which is another thing that I have to say about Chris Statlander when we get to that. But no, for real, like that is something that But I think that nothing about that match had any negative impact on his career or character, and I'm excited for what the Murder Hawk does moving forward.
Yeah, and I thought he did great work. It's probably just unfair on my part comparing it to something like the type of character is something I want him to be as good as a Brock. I want this match to resemble Sting Vader in '92. It's very hard to live up to that, and I'm not saying just because it didn't live up to that, but I'm also saying that I imagine if this happened with a crowd, I feel like everybody would treat it like it's Sting Vader, but that little whatever that slickness is that is very hard for me to describe, that je ne sais quoi.
Yeah.
I
get it though.
I think that I see that and I wish it was there and I'm hoping it's there. I'm not trying to say the guy can't do it. I'm hoping it gets there because he's already so close. A lot of what they're doing is really smart with him. A lot of the way this match was booked was really good. I like Jake the Snake Roberts being there to kind of help add a grit to a Cody rivalry that I think really helps. It's going to really help Cody down the way. And if it's just Lance Archer going up against him, they could have had the same match, Jake the Snake Roberts as that intrigue that Lance Archer couldn't do on his own. I think there's a lot of good to take away. I just, in terms of when I'm trying to figure out what is it there that I'm like, if I was to say this wasn't a 5-star match, why? It's not just because of the crowd.
Yeah.
I think with the crowd, I would still be like, something's missing. And it's a little bit, I'm hoping it's just Lance Archer is going to get better in that role. So if they do this match again, it's even better than it was this time.
You know what it is you made me think of something. You want Lance Archer to be potentially more of like a Brock. I want Braun Strowman to be more of a Lance Archer. How's that sound?
Yeah, that would be helpful for Braun. Not arguing against it.
So on top of that is I think Lance Archer, by the end of their careers, I think is going to be a bigger star than Braun Strowman. I could be wrong, but just the talent's there is there. And maybe I'm just a fan because I saw him make that little kid cry, that one time. Like watching Lance Archer make children cry is some great character work that I don't think you'll see in AEW. Maybe that's what it is. He's trying to fill that void of screaming at children, and you just can't do that in the COVID-19 era. This fucking pandemic is just ruining all of us.
Just have one of the wrestlers bring their kids with them. That's not bad at all. So we'll talk about the other big match on the card. Obviously, Jon Moxley versus Mr. Brodie Lee. That is how it is put on the wiki card.
Which I enjoy. I enjoy very much. I like that moniker.
All right. So this is another one that, like, I'll just start with my big nitpick and then we can get into the positives. The only nitpick is that
Normal.
Brodie Lee's outfits have been awful. They look like trash. I don't know how much is to blame that he didn't know he'd become the leader of the Dark Order until he was already right there.
Along with this is what is strange about this is I can't tell what direction they're going because there is this like in the dark. Also don't fully understand the Dark Order. I don't know what type of cult they are. Like I don't. They're not like a. They seem very. I don't know. When you see like Brodie Lee's outfits, they're very like space agey. The UFO is gonna come pick us all up kind of cult leader. But when you see him in promos, he's just this like. I mean, some of them have been kind of like nods towards like Vince McMahon or the Mr. Brodie Lee, the suit, this and that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where you go with that as far as rig gear. But I mean, I don't think you just. I mean, do you go corporate Kane? Probably not. I don't think that's going to work necessarily. No. But no, I don't know what is the gear and the character. I'm going to kind of agree. I don't think it's fully lined up over the course of the last month or so.
So I'll give you an example of why I don't think it matters what the gimmick is supposed to be, and the complaint's still there that it just doesn't look good. So Becky Lynch, her like steampunk gear, right?
Yeah.
It looked good. It didn't make sense.
Yeah. It had nothing to do with the character. Cheap. It looks cheap. It's
also,
I guess I don't.
Brodie
I don't
Lee
know
needs
what
to fight a suit guy because the suits don't fit.
Yeah, and I don't know what I want it to be. I don't know if there's. Is it that there's elements of Luke Harper still attached to this character, or is it that it's just some underdeveloped like idea of what this character should look like?
So I got a question for you.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Jim Jones. You're going to ask my favorite cult leader?
You've said it a million times.
I take it back. David Koresh.
Well, the Waco really got you turned over on that one, huh?
I got about an hour and a half promo on that. Yeah.
Okay. I'm really glad that you got taken in by a CMT television show. That's well done.
It was all right.
It was
first of all,
it was good. I'm
first
joking.
Of all,
don't get upset. It was good.
I'm pretty sure it was Showtime.
No, it's CMT.
Waco?
Mm-hmm. It was on CMT. I looked it up, and that's why I was like, because it was on Netflix and or
ABC.
Whichever.
It was ABC. It was probably rebroadcasted on CMT. I don't think you're right. I don't think you're right at all.
You can look it up, but the point being, that show, I was surprised by how good it was. I really was. So my
especially for being on True TV.
My thing with Brodie Lee, the outfit, like I would be fine with what they're doing. I'm cool to see where it goes. I wish the outfits were better, but I don't think that stops me from like wanting to see what he can do with that character. But I do wish I knew like what he would have done if they didn't go for that swerve. Because I feel like this one almost we could understand what the Dark Order was if they were people following around broken Matt Hardy. The fact that they hit us with the swerve, maybe it was a good idea, but like what was his plan before they told him to do that? Because he's been sitting on the shelf for a while. He's had all these ideas in his head. And obviously we can see the connection of, okay, part of this is going to be Mr. Brodie Lee attack on the guy who he has some pretty good rants about. We heard it on the Talk is Jericho podcast. But what was he planning to do for all those months? Is he's like, I'm going to be ready when my time comes and I have this character down. And then a couple weeks before, they're like, hey, actually, we want you to do this for the company. And he even said it on Talk is Jericho. It was like, he wasn't sure about it, but, particularly with it being a cult gimmick. But he was like, all right, this is what you need me to do. Great, because he also knew at the end of the day, they let him do it his way once he stepped into that role. What do you think he was planning for?
I don't know, but he's already a better cult leader than Bray Wyatt. I mean, fuck, he at least has followers.
He's not better than what Bray Wyatt was on the first run of that.
No, but I mean, like, mathematically, I think more people would have a standoff with the ATF on Brodie Lee's side than Bray Wyatt, but
no. Well, they might have. Here. So here's the thing: he might not have more people, but Brodie Lee would have more of the little wusses that aren't going to help you. All of Bray Wyatt's followers. all
They'd all
had
be all be
AKs. They were
they'd
ready
all
to
be
go.
They'd all be Rory Culkin.
Basically, I think Bray
Yeah,
had the better crew.
I think it is weird. It's a weird character in the sense that I think most wrestling fans are just excited to see Brodie Lee. Like, they just wanted to see Brodie Lee. They got Brodie Lee. They didn't give a shit what his character was, which is kind of an insult to the guy, because I know that he is a very creative person and cares about character work as much as anybody. So I don't honestly know what it's supposed. I get very confused watching anything with Brodie Lee in the Dark Order. Like, it doesn't seem to clash as well. Like, again, like you said, Matt Hardy makes more sense within that faction.
He makes that faction make sense, which otherwise it didn't before Brodie
And maybe
Lee got
that's
there,
the thing.
and it
It's
doesn't
like
now.
they're like a bunch of like mask wearing like cyber goths who like video games. Like, I don't really understand them. I mean, I guess that crowd exists, and I have met people like that now that I say it out loud, but like, I wish I hadn't. And I don't know
I think we
how
all feel
any of
that
those
way.
people tie into Brodie Lee. Like,
So with that odd character, the way they're kind of building it up, and I think I will give a little bit on Jon Moxley for this, because he didn't give me something that made me believe he wanted to beat the hell out of Brodie Lee. He didn't give me something that made me believe that he wants to go up against this guy that, you know, he was really excited to get here, like the way that he cuts that promo. I think this is Moxley's worst performance so far since leaving WWE, was getting me sold on a match that I was excited to watch before it happened. That said, I really enjoyed this match. I just wasn't psyched going in like I thought I would be a year ago.
I enjoyed the match. I didn't really care about the program, though. Maybe it is because the Brodie Lee Exalted One character is still being worked out. Like, I think if it was just a standalone Brodie Lee coming in and being like you just have two fucking big bad dudes going up against each other. That's the match that you want to see with Brodie Lee and Jon Moxley. That being said, long term, I think the Brodie Lee character as the Exalted One will work. It's just gonna take a little bit of time and workshopping. So putting him in a world title match now, I think, is actually a really good idea for that same reason, in the sense that character is going to go through a lot of development. And when you have character development, it's what wrestling is built on, is like characters. It's the whole thing that Chris Jericho won't stop talking about is reinventing yourself. And he's right in that, when you go through and you change yourself and you reinvent yourself, your next world title program is a totally different program than the last. So maybe it's a good thing that this happened now, and and all it had to be, the match itself was fucking fun. It was just a hardcore match. It was great. It was two dudes that you've been wanting to see square off, and it didn't really matter in the build-up. And the match was so good that didn't matter that you didn't have a ton of build-up. That's kind of the way I viewed it, in the sense that these two will face off again, and the next time you see it, the program will be better. And I mean, ideally the match will be better, but the match was great. So they really only set up positivity for, the future of what they can do together, especially if they then move to it. I mean, like, I think it's easier to get a match over if it's a hardcore match. Yeah. Especially with a character like Jon Moxley. And all that does is that doesn't limit him. You put him in a match that is a standard match, and he's going to put on great work. So now the next time you see these two, it will probably be that type of match, and it'll be completely different, and you won't just be rewatching the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, they also did that match. I mean, it wasn't like they turned this into this typical hardcore match that Moxley starts pulling out crazy stuff. Like, they just went outside the ring, You have the spot going through the ramp.
Yeah.
You have the using the chip, but it was just destruction. They're just beating the hell out of each other.
It was
Nobody's trying to one up the other with crazy weapons.
Yeah, it was environmental. It wasn't gimmicky. You didn't need a barbed wire spider web or whatever. Like, it was just these guys using what was at their disposal.
Yeah. We'll transition. I wish we wouldn't have spent so long talking the negative. Key takeaway, anybody who's watching this, it was positive. It was a positive match. Hopefully, in terms of what they do with Brodie Lee's character, they fix it. And for me, I don't even have that many things to critique about the character other than fix the outfit. Fix the outfits, and I'll give you an extra 6 months to figure out how to make this character work. Just fix the outfits, guys. At least get him a suit that fits. Because of all the things with Vince, he doesn't have suits that don't fit. Like if you're going to do a satire of him, at least get Brodie Lee to get some real dress shoes.
You're sitting here nitpicking guys like Brodie Lee, and then turn around to pay a huge compliment to Vince McMahon. Like,
I'm not saying Vince looks good. He has that old man suit where the belt's too high, but the suits fit what he's going for. He didn't go to the wrong tailor. He didn't get this at a thrift shop. Like, he's got fancy suits. Like, don't have Brodie Lee go out there and look like the kid who had to dress up for something at school, and his parents just pulled out his dad's like sport coat and threw it on. And he's like, well, I guess this is it. This is what a fancy adult wears. Like, that's what Brodie Lee looked like.
All right, now you're making this episode a little personal. So can we just move on?
Is that you? Are you that person?
Can we just move on?
You think it'd be a compliment if I compared you to Mr. Brodie Lee? So next up, this was a fun one. Nyla Rose defending her title against Hikaru Shida, and obviously we know this had some extra emotion brought in with the news. Ethan, tell us, since you are our indie insider, about the sad event that happened over the weekend that ended up influencing the extra emotion that was in this really good women's championship match.
Well, sure. I think by now everyone's heard of the passing of Hana Kimura, and it being a very unnecessary, senseless kind of tragedy due to something that it kicks up 2-3 times a year where somebody ends their life due to cyberbullying. I think that it's a fucking bullshit thing that keeps happening, created by bullshit people who don't need to have a fucking social media account. It's I think Excalibur, I think, was the one who said it, and he said it really well. It's like social media is created to bring us together, where often it drives people apart. And it's just this unnecessary tragedy where, like, just not only losing like a reality TV show personality or a strong up and coming professional wrestler, just lost a 22-year-old human being who was a perfectly good human being, a very decent and kind human being from all accounts, and it's just ridiculous and unnecessary. So that ties into this match in the sense that a lot of your talent from Japan is even more closely connected to this situation. So then for somebody like Shida to come out and put on a match, same day. I'm not sure what if this was pre-taped and what if it was live recorded, but in this similar setting, I'm pretty sure that this had already occurred before this match, is my understanding of the timeline. And then just put on this just excellent performance is a lot to ask of somebody. And then I think on top of that, you look at not just AEW, but you look at WWE talent and Io Shirai and Asuka and Kairi Sane, who all had all of their very just tragic, responses to the situation, very clearly posted on social media as well. And I think that it was kind of a match that, I'm not saying that it made anything better, but it was a nice thing to see of somebody who, her fellow countrywoman going out there and putting on a rock star performance, and what was a really good match, a great match, and somebody who we've talked about since kind of our first exposure to the Joshi style wrestling, of being like that's the one, like that's the woman right there, that is the one that stands out, and then kind of not really having a ton of like examples of that, and seeing other people kind of being highlighted for the right reasons. But then, just the timing of it being paired with this tragedy, and then also paired with her excellent success in this match, was something that, of anything involving the situation over the weekend, it was kind of the one like feel good moment.
Yeah, and I think that Shida, I'm just going to trust Excalibur with his explanation of the connection between Shida and the departed. Like, it's something that the emotion, I don't know how much is there just because she won her first belt. I don't know how much is because of the timeline and when this happened, and just still dealing with that emotion as she goes out there and puts on a hell of a performance. But it was a amazing thing to watch because I think I knew that these two competitors could put on a great show. I think we've seen it from Nyla Rose at different times. I think when we've had the negatives that we've taken away from the AEW women's division so far, she's not been one of them. I think Shida we talked about it, she was somebody who maybe should have been the first one put up. No offense to Riho, but like it just seemed like at least the way the story ended, I definitely felt like I was right in thinking, is she a little too small to be the one who wins this way? Like, can you be the underdog if you get to be the first, So I think it's great that now Shida has that belt. It'll be interesting to see how Nyla Rose responds to it. The match itself was just really entertaining. A lot of great moments. And Shida also had, I assume that's a Tifa Final Fantasy VII outfit that she's going there. It's all red, but I think it's the same.
That, I guess.
I think it's the same outfit, and so she comes in looking like $1 million. She performs like $1 million. Nyla Rose puts her through hell. Anytime I can see Nyla Rose get hit with the Falcon Arrow off the top rope, it's that's the moment I knew she didn't need the belt on her. When she first did that, I was just, and I don't even know if it was Nyla Rose, but it was one of the bigger female talent that when she pulled it off, I was just like, nuh-uh, that didn't happen. No way. Give her a belt. I don't know where this goes from here, but I'm excited to see it. I don't know how much is me just wanting to have that in the first place, but honestly, there really is no connection I have to Shida other than seeing how good she's been so far and wondering why she wasn't the first one up. One of the ones who got a chance before her, which seemed a little weird, and you said you wanted to talk about it, so I don't really have much to say, but Chris Statlander and Penelope Ford have their match. What stood out about it? What about it you feel definitely needs to be talked about? Because we've said some negative things about Chris Statlander in the past. At least I have.
Sure. And I had too, and I think, and I had kind of put this caveat on it as well. When I critiqued her last match against Nyla Rose, and that it was like there just seemed like there was like a step missing, and I think they had also even said like she had been like battling the flu, and so I wasn't sure of how much of that actually had an effect on it. Watching this match was like watching a totally different wrestler, I thought. I really felt really positive about both performers. Penelope Ford, not Cruz, Penelope Ford as well. And just being that, she is not she's not just a manager. She plays the manager role well, which you don't see very much of anymore. Which is kind of this like it's one of the criticisms I've heard, not even a criticism, just like a comment, I guess, of the women's wrestling revolution, that women can wrestle and women's wrestling is great, is that it eliminates a lot of your like manager roles that you've seen in the past as well. And then you see someone like Lana, who's a manager, and she's the fucking worst part of wrestling that I've ever fucking seen in my life. So seeing it be both sides of the coin, where Penelope Ford, I just think Penelope Ford is actually a very important character in wrestling, and kind of an unsung one at that, and that she plays the manager character so well, can get involved physically, mentally, but also goes out and wrestles her own matches. Like this is something you see out of a Zelina Vega as well. And it's somebody who you see improving and It's not somebody who seems like a liability in the ring. I think a lot of times when you cross over someone who's a manager who's then also wrestling a match, that liability conversation can happen. And I don't feel that at all with Penelope Ford. I thought that of the wrestling matches I've seen her in, this is probably the best one I've seen her in. And, I've only really seen Statlander wrestle a couple of times, but from what I had said last time, I was totally in the opposite camp. I thought she looked really smooth. She looked strong. She hit everything right. And, Penelope Ford's quickly turning into a fucking bump machine. So I really enjoyed that match as it seemed like one of the match on the card that probably had the least consequence for anybody. It was still enjoyable. Like a lot of times those matches are referred to as like a cool down match or just something to kind of, break up your major storylines. I still really enjoyed this match.
Yeah, I didn't pay attention to it, so I'm just going to let you have your thing.
Cool. That's
Dustin
fine.
Rhodes, Shawn Spears, somehow was the same way. I thought that would be a little bit longer. So it was a shorter match, and I guess I understand it just having Dustin Rhodes getting over on Shawn Spears, making him look like the fool. It felt like a very WWE type thing that I just didn't like it or care. And if people enjoyed it, fine. I just didn't do anything for me.
It was all right. I think the whole thing centered around the underwear gag was kind of which is, like you said, that's kind of a WWE sort of in their lane. But I think if anything, I would have liked more of a squash match. I would have liked it to be that there isn't any back and forth whatsoever, and it's only a 3-minute match. Like rather than it kind of seem like it has its faces of Shawn Spears, fighting it off. Because if you have it where he's so caught off guard and he's not ready to actually wrestle, and Dustin comes out and beats the shit out of him and gets the win, then it doesn't really hurt his character. It's well, kind of like John Cena versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania in that sense of it being like, oh, well, I was so caught off guard by what was actually happening that, it doesn't make him look any worse in the long run. I don't really know where you go with Shawn Spears' character at this point.
I think he goes to China and develops a new move that nobody likes. I mean, he's got to pull the John Cena move, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, you were pretty pro Ty Dillinger when he was in WWE. How have you felt about this? Because he's no longer shackled by WWE, holding him down, putting a glass ceiling over him. Have you been satisfied with what he's done so far in AEW?
No, I missed the Perfect 10 in NXT. That was the version of this person that I was the most satisfied with.
I liked him when we went to Dynamite. I liked the dark match he did. I feel like there is something there that is definitely some classic wrestling. I just don't know why that doesn't show up on TV. It just doesn't play well.
There's definitely, like you said, there's definitely something there. There's something that I, as a wrestling fan, I really got into the Ty Dillinger character when he was on NXT. For whatever reason, looking back on it, maybe it's one or two specific matches he had, and that's it. But I don't know. There's definitely something there, but I don't know. Putting him in a squash match against Dustin Rhodes isn't going to be the way to find out what's there.
Yeah, and I don't know how much I don't care because, you have Dustin supposed to be injured and this and that, and it's just like you're going to have to work hard to get me to care about him as this kind of old timer. I think if you're going to skip over the no, he still got it, and it's like I'm not even sure how much you could convince me he had it to begin with in terms of being a great work rate type of guy. You can go back he's a good hand. If you're gonna convince me he's a superstar, what's other than the Cody match, what's Goldberg's next best match?
Goldberg?
Goldust. What's his next? He's acting like Goldberg out in the ring right now. What's
probably
his next?
Probably the backlot brawl with Roddy Piper at WrestleMania.
And then you go 3 is
probably any match where he hits a running bulldog because it's the best bulldog in the business. It's the best fucking snap power slam in the business. It's a dude that I'm not going to question his work rate at all. Like, yeah, you don't have WrestleMania classics. I think that's because of the character he was saddled with, not because of his work rate.
I'm still saying in terms of what he brings to the table, like there was never this like heyday that was so great that now you're like, he's at this age coming back to AEW. He had this great setup. Cody put him in the perfect position to get that kind of into his career. Whatever it is, it doesn't need to end today. He can put on some great matches in AEW. But if you're going to immediately go back and just pretend that he hasn't lost a step, that's nuts. Like, if you go back and you watch the Ric Flair matches when he gets into his 50s, he's not pretending he's still the Ric Flair of the 70s and 80s, but he's still going to put on a show. And I think that's a problem with the storytelling. I get that you want to avoid some of the things WWE does where they kind of put people into a box and it has to be comical in that way. But I need him to play into the idea that he's lost a step because he clearly fucking has. And so him just coming out and burying Shawn Spears, I don't care enough about Shawn Spears to be upset by it. It just doesn't seem like a good game plan for me and doesn't get me interested in the next Dustin Rhodes match.
Well, and maybe it's that maybe they're moving away from that. Maybe it's that they don't want to have it be his last ride anymore and that he's, not on the way out. They maybe are saving that for later. I
need him to wrestle from that mindset, though. I need him to wrestle not like I'm just as good as all these other chaps. I need him to know he is slowing down, and if he's going to win matches, he's going to need to pull a rabbit out of his hat. Like, he's going to have to do something special each time and not just be going out there and, like, making people look like shit. Because it's similar to, if you have, whether it's a Goldberg, whether it's an Undertaker, whatever it is, if you're just going to keep pretending like they're in the ring with this guy that we've seen him go with somebody else the night before, but then all of a sudden he's in a match with Dustin Rhodes, he's in a match with one of these old timers who has a broken hip. Like, the match needs to be produced in a way that reflects the fact they're not doing all the same shit that they used to do. And otherwise, I think that is the moment where you're burying some of the younger talent when they should be getting some level of push, some rub from facing a legend. I think you have to, especially in AEW, where they're aiming to be more realistic than WWE, that needs to always be ever present in how Dustin works the match.
I hear you, but I think that's something that they're delaying. I think that's something that they're trying to save, is what I'm saying. I think that's something that
I'm not saying you have to tell the story every time, but he has to work that way always and not just pretend that these other guys are magically less athletic the moment they're in the ring with Dustin Rhodes.
I don't know, man. He still hits that fucking power slam. I don't know what to tell you.
It was never that good to begin with. You're overshooting how good it was.
Fuck you. It's the best power slam in the history of the business.
Okay.
It's got the best running bulldog in the history of the business. All right? If he can hit those two things, he's still better than Goldberg.
You're overstating what he's.
I'm going to go ahead and say that Dustin Rhodes is a better wrestler than Goldberg and always has been.
Yeah, that's fair. And if we're just talking about being a worker in the ring, although if you take what Goldberg does well, obviously it sold more tickets than Dustin Rhodes ever could.
Oh, you mean ending Bret Hart's career? Yeah, that's a solid fucking move right there.
Bret Hart already ran out of making money. He already got to the end of it. So Goldberg kept making money.
All right, I'll fight you about this later.
So let's talk about a couple other matches because I think they're pretty solid. We can't get out of here without talking about them.
Yeah,
MJF Jungle Boy. This is one that even if somebody has enjoyed what MJF has done in the ring, I thought, going back to that Cody match, picture perfect heel, especially the way he knows how to end a match. So glad. How do you put that heel up against Jungle Boy? So now you have MJF, who's not a big guy, facing a really small guy who can work really, really well, but usually is facing large guys that he has to overcome that size differential. Even with me having that kind of classic wrestling mindset, still felt like these two put on a pretty damn good show and had a lot of good storytelling while doing it. Wasn't just let's do high spots to get you excited. The way they told that story, and I think the ending, once again, MJF is finding the perfect way to finish matches as heels. He is absolutely the anti-Miz. I keep saying it, and it keeps being more true every match MJF participates in.
I think, MJF is there's just not even a contemporary for him. There's no comparison of how good that guy is. And Jungle Boy, just every match I watch of his, he is just like such a true babyface, and MJF is such a true heel that these two together is the perfect pairing, honestly. And the way that match worked, of it being that, Jungle Boy that is nursing this injury throughout the whole match, and that ends up being, the point where MJF really takes advantage. It's not even that heelish as it is just like what you would normally see out of a wrestling match. It wasn't like the dirtiest way he's won a match. It's like he finds a way to win as a heel without burying the other upcoming babyface. On top of that, there were a couple of just really gnarly bumps in this match. I mean, the reverse Rana onto the ring apron is, of the entire night, probably the roughest bump that I literally jumped out of my chair and reacted to.
I think I finally gotten to the point where the Canadian Destroyer on the ring apron doesn't scare me as much. Like, okay, they've done this enough. It's still scary, but not but that move fails in the ring. There are times it just doesn't land well, and you just kind of, a lot of people are lucky they have not been more hurt.
You just hope you don't paralyze yourself. Yeah.
But to do that on the apron, holy God, it doesn't matter if it worked. It scared the crap
I can't
out
imagine being like Darren Drozdov watching some of these people be like, how the fuck did that guy get up? And all I was supposed to do was take a powerbomb. Good Lord, dude. And I know that's the botch of all botches, that shit happens in the ring, with draws, but how does that not happen once a year to somebody?
I think Undertaker brought that up on some of his podcast circuit work that he's been doing for the last ride. Is just the fact that he's just old, and that's what's got him to this point where his body's broken down. It's he's lucky he wasn't paralyzed from something 20 years ago. They're inches from it hurting, and I think that was his response to anybody trying to call it fake or talk about well how are you complaining about injuries when UFC guys take more bumps? It's we're always this close, and the fact that there aren't more, catastrophes is pretty crazy.
Even the reverse run on the apron in that match was off center. Yeah. He hit it at a weird angle that was the way he sold it told you right away that he was selling, but it was still obviously that fucking kills. But he at least didn't land the way somebody would if they were suddenly a quadriplegic. Yeah. Which I guess is comforting to an audience. Maybe he's a babyface at heart. I don't know. But holy shit.
The first mistake MJF made as a heel was not just falling down and looking
paralyzed. Yeah.
I mean, it was that move, and there's a lot of stuff they did in this match, and it's not just, once again, not just high spots. The finish was one that, depending on where you kind of land on it, I thought having MJF go for pulling on the tights, Jungle Boy return favor. When you talk about him being this pure babyface, whenever somebody even cheats, even if it's returning what the other guy already did, you're like, oh shit, and that puts him in a position where MJF ultimately reverses and then
stooped to their level,
and he beats him with classic wrestling.
It is.
Maybe that's more heel than anything he's ever done. Is to win fairly in that moment.
It's that the heel move is that for a moment he brought Jungle Boy down to his level and then beat him with experience. Yeah. And the sense that it went from being
I destroyed your hero. I'm the Joker taking down Batman.
Yeah, being a cheap roll up, getting him to just stoop to your level and then pinning him with, like you said, a pure wrestling hold, a pure roll up. It's the most frustrating way for that babyface to lose.
He corrupted your hero. It's so good.
It's great. I am all in for whatever those two characters do. I feel like those two, that's, I think, going to be a pairing that you see a lot of in the future.
Yeah, I enjoyed the match. I thought it was good. Next up, though, the one that actually I'm surprised we waited till the end to talk about it, because honestly, we've had a lot of conversations about ladder matches with no crowd and how, what's the real payoff. The casino ladder match was a damn good time. I don't know how much it would have been if you don't have those wrestlers around the ring chanting it on and making it still go, but a lot of really good spots. you had the humor, but you also had a lot of destruction. You had a lot of good face-offs, a lot of intermingling. What was your favorite, just face-off in the match? Two guys going at it, just staring each other down. Which one was your favorite during the Casino Ladder match?
See, this is hard because this match had a lot of my AEW favorites in it. Anytime Darby Allin throws a skateboard, an angel gets its wings clipped. And I think that I could use more of that in my life. But and even him doing the what is he called? Is it the acid drop in? Is that what he calls it?
I don't know, but he should never do it again onto a ladder.
Oh, that's Jimmy Havoc. I don't know. Anyway, it's with the drop in off the ladder through the ladder. Like, Jesus fucking Christ! I was like, he's like selling his leg, and I was like, nah, pretty sure he just broke his fucking leg. Like,
did he get up after that? I can't even remember.
He kept going. My God. I mean, it took him a while, but and then I mean, to me, the pairing that was the one I want to see is Brian Cage and Luchasaurus. That's anything with Luchasaurus I'm here for. And those two are just monsters. And seeing Brian Cage pop up was very cool. Having Taz there is interesting.
Brian Cage, just go full circle to go back to the way we talked about Lance Archer. I feel like they're both put into a similar type of role. Obviously, Brian Cage doesn't have, Jake the Snake Roberts. Like, okay, who's next best up? Give him Taz. I think it's smart. I think it works great. In terms of the way he moves as a character, he might be more of the Brock. And then I don't know what Lance Archer is specifically, but like Brian Cage is pulling that off. I just also feel like Brian Cage was closer to being that like sure confidence in that character. He just also was a little bit more it might have just been he was trying to be more athletic with how big he is. So it was a little more awkward. He almost gave that Goldberg vibe of like, watch me do a backflip, and then I will manhandle everybody in front of me. He was doing a lot of enziguris and stuff that was like, okay, cool, but the ring work, I'd like to see him tighten it down a little bit more to, show us the high-flying stuff, show us that you are that super athlete, but be more focused on what Lance Archer did well, which was crush people, beat the hell out of them.
Yeah.
I love that part, but he did that confidence. I did buy that he was that guy even more than I have from Lance Archer so far. Like, he just walked in first match, and I'm like, yeah, he's a guy who enjoys beating the fuck out of everybody who's in the ring.
Yeah. And him being now in the title picture is, I think, a really interesting pairing with Moxley.
Throw all those records out the book. Apparently, you just show up and you get a title shot.
Yeah, fuck. Real sports. Just got to be the most recent guy to debut. Fuck, I'm going to debut next week. See what happens.
That's how Jordan won his championships, right?
I don't know. I think he had to do the JOB for Detroit at one point, but
that's true.
Yeah. But yeah, that match and having Joey Janela as your substitute, just put Joey Janela anywhere and I'm happy. And just hope he doesn't die. I mean,
I feel like Joey Janela is the one guy in AEW who needs a script, not because he's not like good on the mic, but I feel like he nails these great promos, and then when he gets out of them, he fails. Like, I forget, and maybe it's just a moniker that is like a bad boy. Like, it's good to sell a T-shirt. It's bad to end a promo that you were nailing,
Yeah.
Like, he was like, I'm buying in. I'm in on Joey Janela. In just the awkward way, and I forget the phrasing, but whatever it was, it ended on him calling himself a bad boy. And it's like, that's better for somebody else to call you and to have on a T-shirt.
Yeah.
But when you say it about yourself after having this awesome, like, that promo got you psyched up. That's not Joey Janela as a joke. Joey Janela is a serious wrestler, nailed a great promo, and then it ends on this note that's like, oh yeah, he's the joke wrestler. Like, that's where we're at right now. Somebody needs to write him better finishes to his, because he can deliver them so damn well.
Yeah, he can. It's just like that dude who, I don't know if it's just that he's living his character. Like, we talked about this. Like, he's that guy, he's the pro wrestler that like barely looks like a pro wrestler because he doesn't want to give up partying, which is exactly his character, which is why I love Joey Janela so much.
It's pretty solid, and he does amazing work when he's out
Yeah.
there. I'm trying to think if we're missing
SCU. I was to
anybody.
say we didn't mention SCU, and they.
I thought it was a bad start to the match. I thought the way
I,
they did that, it was
yeah.
just didn't play well.
And I think. I mean, I think the concept makes sense, but also it's like they're not really at a point to where they need to. And maybe that's why it was like a softer take on it, like pitting SCU against each other, and also like Scorpio Sky's already recently had a title shot, and maybe it's something that I think if you're gonna have that head to head, like infighting, I think you do it for something like the TNT title.
I also think I guess I was fine with the infighting, but you need the announce team to do a better job. Better explain to me that this is not a non-transferable chip that you're bringing down for a title shot, because they were middling on exactly what their strategy should be, and it should be very clear going in. Like, we should know what the rules are of the match. The competitors should know, the announcer should know, and they should explain what's happening. They did such a bad job of explaining the strategy of these guys that when they first went to go get the ladders, I'm like, oh, this is just something. Let them win before anybody else gets out here, and they'll decide in post. They'll have a match in post who gets to cash in the chip. Without explaining it to me, and with the announcers being confused in the middle, and WWE does this a lot, and they have everything scripted down, and Vince is yelling in their ear, so theirs is a little bit more problematic. But AEW needs to make sure these announcers are explaining that right and giving me, because that's the important part. I don't know what story's going on because I need to know the rules going in, and then you need to explain what these competitors are thinking. And I think all of them did a bad job. Usually it's just JR that right now I can't tell if he's phoning it in or he's lost it. And then Tony Schiavone has the voice, but he's not always the best at explaining in-ring stuff more than just he calls what he sees. And then Excalibur, I don't know what it is, but like 90% of the time he gets it, but he seems to be the cleaner. He's the fixer. Like, somebody else screws up and he's just there to catch him. But if he's just there to lead by himself, he's not doing an amazing job of being the guy that makes sure we know what's going on. And this was probably, if there's a problem with AEW, it's probably commentary. And this was a good example of it, because I don't care how early it is in the SCUs, like, oh, is there tension? Like, but I need to know whether they're actually supposed to be fighting each other. Are they being idiots right now that don't understand the rules of this match? Is there a problem with waiting for the next guy to come out? Like, it's very tough to figure out what their ring psychology is, because nobody explained it very well to begin with.
I don't know what it is in all of wrestling, with the exception of the NWO. It's like every stable is just like, when it comes to matches like that, they're just like too stupid to team up or too proud. I think I think it's always tried to be painted as a matter of they're just such great competitors that they'll go against each other. But it's also like they're like, well, I mean, one of us has to win this. We could just team up on everyone and then like go head to head. Like, it's like you see the Royal Rumble like every single year, and you're watching the Royal Rumble, and it's like, it's the stuff that pisses me off when I play the video game and I'm playing a Royal Rumble and one of my stable mates comes out. I'm like, all right, tight. We're just gonna like run train, and oh no, what are you doing? Why are you trying to throw me over the top rope? Like, oh, it's stupid, poorly developed AI. No, it happens in the actual Royal Rumble every year, and it's really annoying. So it's just like this stupid idea that everyone in the history of wrestling has somehow agreed upon, that if teammates are in a multi-man match, they just like don't team up. So I don't totally understand. I don't know if I'd say the one problem with AEW is commentary either. I think that,
I mean, honestly, there's other problems, but
and maybe it's not so much the commentary, it's maybe the direction of commentary. Like, I'd rather listen to Tony Schiavone and JR before listening to any WWE announced team that doesn't involve, well, aside from NXT. I mean, it's NXT is the one that I will prefer, but
I like whenever WWE gets a new announcer that is still in like a grace period, because then they get to say what they want. And then 6 months in, when you realize they've been beaten into Vince's like one size fit all announcer, and then you're like, never mind, didn't work.
Yeah. And yeah, it's so I actually really do enjoy the commentary on AEW for that reason. Also, just hearing Tony Schiavone, even more so than JR, hearing Tony Schiavone call a match there's like this level of nostalgia to it that
I think I'd have more nostalgia with JR, but it has to be JR. It has to be good. And I don't know what is
and maybe
missing
that's
right now,
why
but it's missing. Um,
I mean,
yeah,
time catches up to everybody. I mean, JR is just, I think, not about the like hype anymore. I think he's just very straightforward and very direct, and that doesn't come across as flashy like it used to. You know,
I think part of it is he used to he's always excited, and now he doesn't have the excited factor, which partially could just be not knowing the talent nearly well enough and not necessarily enjoying this level of wrestling as much as he did the types of wrestling he called back in the day. He also used to be really good at knowing the moves and calling them out. Now he's dealing with guys who have some moves that he didn't see as often, and even when he knows what the moves are, he just isn't trying to become that guy that he was before, where he is that kind of Excalibur fills that role. I don't know what JR's role is right now.
Excalibur is JR is everything except for calling out specific moves. That's why Excalibur is there. Still, it's better than Michael Cole just screaming knee every single time somebody throws any move that involves a knee or off the top. Just like I just can't stand most WWE commentary. That's why like Nigel McGuinness and Mauro Ranallo are my favorites, because they have kind of that technical wrestling announcer style, which you still get some of in AEW, but you don't have any of them on SmackDown.
Yeah, and JR still he comes through in the clutch and the big moments. He is the hype man that Excalibur and Tony Schiavone just don't pull off, that really nobody else in wrestling other than Mauro Ranallo. Yeah. And then, Michael Cole gets excited, but it's not good. It's hard for me to take down the WWE announced talent without seeing what they look like with the handcuffs off. But JR definitely, there's still nobody. Even Mauro Ranallo's like, because it divides people. There's some people that really, really love it, and there's some that kind of get taken out by it just by how loud it is, how bombastic it is, and for so much of a match. I think JR's is always perfectly timed.
Those people can go to hell.
I understand some of it. I think but Mauro Ranallo, you take what you get. There's no toning it down to like only do it in this moment. It's like you either get all of it or none of it, and I'd rather take all of it.
Yeah.
JR has, in those big moments for AEW, stepped in where the other guys didn't. And so it's like, okay, I see why he's on the payroll, but it'd also be good at the rest of the time they figure out their roles a little better, because those are the type of moments, beginning of the casino ladder match, where it's not even that these guys are stupid for fighting each other, because they have 2 minutes. One of them should go get the belt or go get the chip first. If you're going to have to fight against each other, this is the best time to do it, because this is the best opportunity for both of you guys. But you should actually fight, and the announcer should let me know that that's actually the best scenario. Tell me what the hell they're doing and why they're doing it. And they seemed just as confused as I was. That's not good for a wrestling match. But the rest of the match was really, really fun, and we hit most of them. Orange Cassidy did his thing. I don't need to explain what was going on, but it was a good time. I don't know enough about Colt Cabana other than his podcast and CM Punk being on it. I watched it and I'm like, what is this thing? I don't know. Could you explain to me what was good about that? I enjoyed what Orange Cassidy was doing. What was Colt Cabana's role, and why was everybody else so excited about what he did?
It's hard to say who really gets his character and who just likes him because he's Colt Cabana. Nothing against Colt Cabana. I enjoy Colt Cabana, but I don't fully understand. I also didn't follow him on the independent scene either. So I'm probably missing something. I'm ignorant to his character. If nothing else, he's just like a wrestler from Chicago and is like a kind of, I don't know, more respectable character. But yeah, I mean, it's what it is. I'm fine with it. I don't have any objection.
I just didn't know if there was anything that I was missing, because I didn't understand him being the one who got over on Orange Cassidy, but did it in such a way that didn't seem entertaining. I didn't know if I was missing something.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably I am too with this one.
All right. You talked about Penelope Ford. We haven't talked at all about Kip Sabian, who's in this match and does some stuff, but I think the biggest thing that stands out to me, I got to get your opinion on, Jimmy Havoc going from what his character was to now sort of suit henchman, but it's got blood stain all over it. So it's still in his lane. Have you liked the change up in his character?
I haven't really paid much attention to the storyline. I'm going to say I don't feel any less invested or more invested. I think it's like, for me as a fan, lateral move. I think that he is like kind of a more violence-based guy. Move him over to heel and make him, someone's muscle. Makes sense too, because I think Kip Sabian needs muscle for his character to work. So I don't know. I think it's a good move for everyone involved.
Yeah, I once again, like you, I didn't really get to see much of the build-in, and we had talked about it on the Money in the Bank recap show that just haven't watched week to week, so just kind of picking it up at the pay-per-view, hoping there's either the promo package beforehand, and of all the stuff that they showed, just didn't show me what was happening there. So I just see it. I'm like, well, that's a big change. I'm not against it. It seems like it could work. I think the look pops. This goes back to the kind of Luke Harper thing. Like, I don't need to understand the gimmick to be like, that looks good. And I think the blood on the suit looks good. I can see where somebody is against it and thinks it looks cheesy, corny, what have you. I think considering what I knew about his character and the way it aesthetically looks, I'm in. I don't think there's anything else for say. We went down, we knocked out each match on the card. Is there any AEW topic, anything about Double or Nothing we need to discuss before we get on out of here?
I don't believe so.
What are you looking forward to the most coming out of this pay-per-view? We had a lot of positives to say. We obviously enjoyed this pay-per-view a lot, probably as much as we could in a no crowd situation that we're in right now. Which storyline going forward, or which even just one wrestler that you're most excited to see what they do post Double or Nothing?
I kind of want to see where both Jungle Boy and MJF go from here. I think that was the match that was, if you really look at which like singles match, was just a great work rate, but also did have a lot of story built into it. I think that one really does stand out, and I'm really curious as to where each of those characters go. Like I said, I don't think this is the last time we're going to see those two overlap. I think that could be a long term, on-off kind of rivalry. So I'm curious as to where both of those guys go.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the way we ended this show and the way they started their show. Brian Cage winning the Casino Ladder match. I think I'm excited because I like what they did in the match. I like Brian Cage's look. I like how there are not a lot of guys who meet that criteria. Brian Cage looks like a WWE guy, but we also thought similar things about EC3, and we know how that ended. Brian Cage as that one guy who is going to be the traditional roided out big man, but also can work in the ring, also has Taz as his manager. There's a lot of cool things, and it's interesting choice to keep hot-shotting the new talent up to the championship. But, NXT did that most of the time over the last 4 years, and people loved it as well. So maybe that is just understanding the smart audience pretty well. I want to see how he does, considering he's not the typical-looking AEW star. He's more of what I really enjoy most of the time in wrestling, but haven't had somebody who's of that caliber and has been put into a great position on WWE. Let's see if AEW can do better molding that type of character. So I'm pretty excited for him. I think that's it. I think that's all we have for this episode. We'll be back next week, hopefully with Wade here as well. We are going to fantasy book the release WWE superstars, all those people that were let go. Where will they go? We don't know. But we're going to come up with some fun ways we wish they show back up in wrestling, maybe once audiences return. But we're going to come up with some cool stuff. We'll also end up talking about things like the Last Ride Undertaker documentary on WWE Network and some other wrestling things. We're going to cook up a very fun show. This is not going to be the traditional preview recap that you expect from us. We're going to have some fun stuff to talk about on the next episode of the Make It Mark Wrestling Show on the Tell Me More podcast. Later, Marks.